The truth is, attention seekers, if you want to have a career as successful as mine, you can't do it all yourself. You need to have backers. Amongst some of my favourite backers are backache, backlashes, back bacon, backhanded compliments, jokes that backfire, strange looks from backstage, and most importantly, backswept hair. You know, to cover the, yeah.
Everything we do at Hello Starling is backed and supported by data and insight, so your media campaigns get the best possible results every single time. Visit hellostarling.com.
Backscatterings. Now there's a data word. Hello Starling, the home of attention seekers.
Guys, have you been to Good Sheds in Barry in South Wales?
I have been to Good Sheds in Barry. It's very hipster, isn't it?
It's very hipster. It's very cool. It's where we belong.
It's the kind of place I wish I could grow a beard.
Yeah,
There's
sure.
a chic little brewery there. I've done a gig there. A lot of beanie hats.
Yeah, I did a gig there as well, upstairs. It was a very hot day.
Why do you ask?
Because did you know that the entire place is built around shipping containers?
Now you say it, I did know that.
Very cool looking shipping containers, if I do
Very
say.
cool.
Yeah.
Do you know who they're made by?
Is it? You say it. You say it.
Should we say it on three?
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
Lion Containers.
Smashing work, team. Lion Containers. They can basically repurpose shipping containers. Obviously, they've got those brilliant sites in Good Sheds in Barry. They've got engine sheds in Bristol as well. So if you need a shipping container for anything, really, you go to lioncontainers.co.uk. Welcome to For Wales, See Wales. My name is Robin Morgan.
My name is Mel Owen.
And I'm Will Hayward.
And we are back for another week.
we made it.
I sounded surprised.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised. I'm happy.
Nice. Did you guys get any recommendations for merchandise?
Oh, for this pod? No, I didn't. Did you?
I got several. One person, Kieran Jones, who is another journalist in South Wales, suggested, because we mentioned the Reenicorn last week.
Reenicorn TM.
That we should do branded condoms.
Interesting.
Somebody else said we should make this more child-friendly.
Straight out the gate, not done it.
I'm such a people pleaser. I'm like, yes to both of those things, but how do we do that? I have no idea.
Well, you know, they need to learn.
Yeah, it's true.
You know?
Should we go out to schools and hand out, should we do sex ed talks?
Oh my gosh, yes, we should.
That'd be good, right?
That would be good, yeah. They get us in to do their PSHE or whatever it's called
Yeah,
now.
yeah. I think that will do a spike in teenage pregnancy, to be completely honest.
Yeah, and I'd be quite proud of that.
Yeah, sure. It's nice to have a legacy, right?
It is, to be fair.
From experience, I can confirm that the more interested in politics you are as a child, the less likely you are to have sex. So actually, it could be quite good for like teenage pregnancy and stuff like that.
That's very, very true. The best form of contraception is to be a big old politics geek.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I am so safe.
I have no kids. You, if I can look at the cool guy over here.
2 kids. I've had sex twice.
Nice.
Jesus,
nice. Unless they're twins.
What was it like? I don't know.
Have you guys noticed what's on the screen? So for the audio listeners at home, we have producer Darryl has put something quite cool on the screen, hasn't he?
Absolutely. And you should watch it on YouTube as well. A nice little shout out to our YouTube watchers. If you want to be somebody who looks at our faces, I understand if you don't want to do that. But, you know, you can watch it on YouTube as well. Nice little plug. So on the screen, what is this, Will?
This is a extract from the Encyclopedia Britannica, which gave this podcast its name. Mm-hmm. So as you can see, the Encyclopedia has got a long treatise about seemingly the valleys of Piedmont, which is in the northwest of Italy, but under the section for Wales, it literally just says "See England," that is mad. That's only just over 100 years ago.
It's like looking at BBC News, isn't it? To be fair, please change.
Oh,
yeah,
shots fired.
Yeah, absolutely.
I actually really like people at the BBC. They're my friends.
Well, all of them?
All of them.
All of them. That's good. It's shocking to see it in print there, isn't it? And also just right at the bottom of a page, just Wales, see England.
Yeah.
That's annoying me, that bit of text there where they could have squeezed something else in.
They could have literally put anything in.
There's literally space on the page for just a little sentence.
It just says Wales, see England. So actually our podcast title has 33% more than the entry in the Encyclopedia Britannica because they missed out the 4.
There was a nice comment on socials. I think it was on Blue Sky Social. Is that the full name of it? Or was it just Blue Sky?
I think you just say Blue Sky.
Blue Sky. On blueskysocial.com. And it was somebody who said, we are in their top 5 favourite podcasts which reference the Britannica Encyclopedia.
Nice. Do you reckon we can break the top 3?
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, like by our first anniversary, surely. we?
I think so. We're coming for you. The rest is Encyclopedia Britannica.
There will be one of those soon. Gary Lineker is on a rampage.
He needs to get that sweet, sweet BBC money back.
He does.
More podcasts. Nom nom nom.
That's why they're all my friends.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
I think we've got to talk about first and foremost what we've seen in lots of parts of Wales, but principally the main area was affected by the flooding in the South Wales valleys.
Yeah, it's
Heartbreaking scenes, isn't it?
It's been brutal, hasn't it? And I think we were just chatting before we came on, and producer Daryl mentioned that the Lido, the Ponty Lido, flooded again, and it's going to be having to be all ripped up again because all the plumbing is underneath it. And I think it's those real world impacts. You know, on Radio Wales Breakfast, they were interviewing people who are affected. And I think when you start to hear from people whose homes have been flooded, because you see, oh gosh, you know, horrible weather, I'll stay indoors. Some people don't have that luxury of just battening down the hatches today. It's going to affect them. And especially in these areas, 4.5 years, 5 years after it happened in 2020, horrible.
Yeah, I mean, those storms 5 years ago, I was working as a kind of as a general reporter then, and I went out to a lot of places. It wasn't just in RCT, it was also, you saw it, there was a lot in West Wales, and there was also like down the Usk as well,
right.
In Monmouthshire and Newport. But you talk to these people and it just happens again and again and again. And one of the guys was telling me that every time he's in bed and he hears the rain, you get that, you just hear it hitting the roof, and you worry about it. And it's not like, it's a legitimate worry because it does keep happening. You then can't sell your house. You can't get insurance on your house. And obviously nobody deserves that, but these are some of like the poorest areas of Wales, really tight communities which have rebuilt, and they're trying to keep their high streets going. And then you see them just flooded into just complete, like they're just impassable. It's horrible.
You saw some really beautiful moments of like the people volunteering and stuff. And I think, you know, WhatsApp groups from 2020, which they all kind of came together as communities, were like being fired up again, and sort of people trying to help. But it shouldn't have to be volunteers, right? There should be systems in place. There should be things like, why has this happened again for 4.5 years? in the same areas.
I spoke to Alex Davis-Jones, who's the MP for Pontypridd, and I think what we should say is we're recording this on a Monday. Most of this happened overnight into Sunday morning, so we don't really know the full extent of kind of what has happened. So we're not kind of going to comment on that. But I did speak to her about what she's experienced, so we'll have a listen to that now.
Whenever flooding happens to anybody, it's horrific, and my thoughts are with everybody, every business and every house who's had internal flooding, in the past 24 hours has been awful. But thankfully, it wasn't as bad as it was, 5 years ago in 2020. There has been significantly less flooding to properties and businesses as there was. I suppose we are still in the immediate aftermath at the moment. We are praying for no more rain in the next sort of coming days, and we will be cleaning up and pulling together as a community to try and help those who have been affected. But it has been awful.
Because there has been quite an investment in flood defences, hasn't there, in the area? People will obviously always say we need more. I mean, what's your kind of? I guess you would echo that, would you?
I think. Look, we can always do with more, but as you say, there has been huge, significant investment. You're talking millions in terms of what has been invested across Rhondda and Taf since the last flooding we had just under 5 years ago, in flood defences, in infrastructure upgrades. There has been work being done to the river. We have built new walls, repaired all the culverts, increased capacity in the drainage system, working with partners such as NRW and Dŵr Cymru and Welsh Government. And we have had that significant investment, but ultimately, no one, not even King Canute could stop the tide. There comes a point when you think this amount of water in such a short space of time, it just can't go anywhere. And this time, obviously we will await the proper findings from the appropriate authorities, but the initial assessment has been that this was river flooding, that the river was just overwhelmed, and the culverts and all of the drainage was working appropriately, but it had nowhere to go. It couldn't put it into the river because the river was at capacity. And having spoken to Andrew Morgan, who's the leader of our local authority, he has told me that at some points along the River Taff, the levels were actually higher than they were at Storm Dennis. So quite significantly higher, which goes to show that the flood defences have worked. They have helped, but yeah, you can't stop the tide. You can't stop the water, and we have to start thinking more longer term about what we can do. I know not a lot of people like to hear about it, but this is the impact of climate change. This is the reality we're dealing with, and sadly, we're going to have to think about how else we can manage this flooding longer term, how else we can manage this water, working with associated partners. But right now, those who have been affected, they just need practical support.
I know that area quite well. I've worked in that area. It's they're really tight communities, but they've got real challenges with deprivation and poverty, haven't they? In places, this is the last thing a lot of them need.
This is the valleys. This is, your typical former mining industrial heartlands of South Wales, where you have brilliant communities, the best communities, pulling together, when times are tough, but pulling together in times of celebration and community spirit as well. These are traditional terrace streets. When you're looking at Pontypridd and Strathloin, where Zion Street is, which is the photos that, some of your listeners may have seen, where the awful flooding happened.
I think one thing that struck me there was money has been spent in RCT after the last time. They have built flood defences, but you only have to go on social media that people are understandably angry that this keeps happening to them. Like, it is... I mean, can you imagine that? You've had this nightmare and then 5 years later, it happens again.
But the thing is, 5 years or, a few years, it hasn't been that long. And I'll be honest, hold my hand up, I'm not an expert on what it would take to stop this from happening. But any kind of long-term infrastructure, I feel it probably wouldn't be realistic for it to be put in and then to be working in that short space of time, which obviously doesn't help the residents there at all, who just want to safely go about their lives and knowing that when it does rain they will be okay. But it's just so unfortunate this is happening. And you talk about the Lido. I was there only a couple of weeks ago, and the actual joy that it brought people in the local area to go out on a Sunday morning. There were like community groups who all went, all ages. People were travelling from Newport to go there because it was such a great facility. And I think it is such a shame to take for an area that has had so many financial challenges and social challenges over the years, to then have these great gems ripped away from them again. And my heart just breaks for the people who are going through this, and their belongings and because imagine watching your home be destroyed by something like this.
Yeah, totally. And it's just that long-term impact of it afterwards, as you said, in terms of insurance and things.
Yeah.
So who are the players who are in charge of this stuff? Like, where does the money come from? The people that spent the money, where does that money come from? What resources? How does it get chosen in terms of areas? Because I remember, I think it was National Resources Wales saying they can't protect every home.
No.
Right? Because it's impossible. It's financially impossible to be able to do that. But where does the money come from? How does it get spent? So
it's the management of this is a devolved issue. So Natural Resources Wales do the big picture planning, but a lot of the local stuff is facilitated by local authorities. So RCT Council does a lot of this, and they have spent millions on flood defences. And I don't want to there's a few things I want to kind of cover very, very quickly. The first is there's so many conspiracy theories that come out every time this happens. Stuff like they've left the floodgates open and stuff like that, and it just perpetuates online.
And who's they?
Yeah, and it's like modern day Country Gwylod.
The beavers are at it again.
I think it's you remember during COVID, Di would go, well, I've looked at the evidence and I think this is caused by 5G.
Yeah.
There are, if you really, I don't want to get bogged down into naming particular conspiracy theories, so I don't really want to give oxygen to it. And also, there will be mistakes that have been made and lessons that can be learned. And I think the day after something is probably not the time to analyse it. But if you really, really want to direct your anger somewhere which is logical, if you really want to do it, just blame the last 3 decades of decision makers who have ignored arguments about climate change.
Sure.
Because flooding happened before we started pumping CO2 into the air at a terrifying rate. But we've known for over 3 decades that our actions are causing events like this to become more common and more serious. And they've essentially done a bare minimum. They've paid lip service to it. When we saw that with COP over the weekend where they did come to an agreement, but I think the consensus is they're not doing enough. I think 1.5 degrees of increase in temperature is a laughable target now. So you don't need a conspiracy theory to wonder why these things are happening more and why they're happening more aggressively. And it's because of the actions of humans. And this isn't to say that we shouldn't also be holding local authorities to account for their decision making. But you are right when you say that everywhere can't be protected. And I'm not saying that everywhere that's been flooded shouldn't be protected at all. But Natural Resources Wales have actually, they have a map online which shows not just areas that are flood at the moment, but areas given developments in the climate that are likely to flood. So both from sea level rise and from rainfall. And it's actually terrifying when you look at it because, I mean, Cardiff is one of the most at-risk cities in the world.
Yeah, I sometimes see these kind of people talking about it online, and through just general avoidance, I try not to. I think it's that eco-anxiety thing, right? I don't want to read too much about it because I feel like it's going to scare me.
Yeah.
I do feel, though, I think it would be a really good idea for us to kind of maybe have an expert on or something like that and do an episode about Wales's position in the world when it comes to climate change, because I'll put my hands up. I'm a high emissions girly, you know. I drive about 10,000 miles in a month. You know, I try my best with recycling, but I am of that, you know, that mindset sometimes by default, and I'm not proud of it, that is like, we're not the biggest polluters in the world, and I feel like right knob here washing out my yogurt pot, you know, when Taylor Swift's taking a private jet to her kitchen. So I think it would be really good to have a bit of a deep dive into, as Wales, what can we do? Is it worth us trying when we're such a small nation, or are we playing our part and really kind of punching above our weight? Maybe that could be something we really kind of deep dive into.
I think there's a few things with Wales specifically. So Wales's emissions have fallen significantly. It's going to fall a hell of a lot now. Port Talbot as Steelworks is closed. But what we've actually done a lot of the time is offshore our emissions. The middle of Wales is full of chicken farms now, like tens of millions of chickens just in these huge farms. And they are fed with soy. And that soy comes from deforested parts of the Amazon in the main. So we are chopping down huge areas of the Amazon to grow soy to feed chickens in Wales. They don't count as Welsh emissions, but that is emissions to feed our farms and our insatiable appetite, well, the world's insatiable appetite for chicken.
This sounds like a conspiracy theory. What you've just gone on there, I was like, that's mad.
Actually, RCT Council has done this.
The farmer in me just saw red, because I think as well, like it's popping off. Yeah. We've got beef, literally. Because I think Welsh farmers as well do get a lot of the flack for climate change. I really don't think they are the biggest criminals in this whole saga.
Well, I don't think it's treating farmers as criminals. We have to grow food, but the scale of the climate crisis. Now we are getting a farmer on next week to talk about.
You've had one on every week, guys, just to let you know. What are you saying, Will? A proper farmer?
This one's wearing wellies.
This one's going to wear wellies.
Watch me come in so forward.
I'll be like,
sorry, you are the second best farmer on this podcast.
Trowel.
Flat cap. You're going to go farmer chic next week.
I'm going to put a calf in. Okay, see how you like that.
I think with the scale of the crisis means that we do have to have a conversation about how we produce our food and what we use our land for. And that's going to be really, really tough for farming communities, because if I was a farmer, I would absolutely feel quite attacked at the moment.
Yeah.
I would absolutely feel quite attacked, because your entire way of life is probably going to have to change. And the sensible farmers I speak to, they get it. They want it to be done in a manageable and ethical and compassionate way. There will be some people that are intransigent, but that happens across every single group. That's not unique to farmers. Also, if I heard some of the things the Welsh Government have said historically,
this is it.
I would feel like they don't have my best interest at heart.
This is the thing, and I know you say, you know, the reasonable ones that you speak to, but I think the great majority are reasonable and accept that it's got to change. When you look at New Zealand as a model, as an example, that had a huge impact on the way that the industry has changed. And there are farmers who are accepting of that, you know, but I think the Welsh Government's communication of it has been dire.
We mentioned Port Talbot. I mean, the differences between, as you said, there's a way of changing things in a sort of slow and steady way. The same things were levelled at Port Talbot closing, right?
Yeah.
And I think to compare those two industries is quite interesting, and the way that Welsh Government and the way that UK government speak about it's such a shame, these things are vital to the communities. Do we hear that about farmers as much? I'm not sure.
It's tricky. I mean, with Port Talbot, 10% of Wales's emissions went up one chimney.
Yeah.
That's a crazy figure.
That is
But
crazy.
it is understandable thinking Wales is very small, wider, compared to China, which, builds coal power stations and stuff.
Yeah.
How do we compare? I think part of it is in the UK, we are, comparative to a lot of the world, quite affluent. And a lot of that has been done on the back of us burning lots of fossil fuels, and that has enabled us to become rich. If we go to other countries who are now industrializing and say, you cannot do what we did to get rich, they're going to laugh in our face. And that's why there was a big debate at COP about paying money for people to become more green in terms of their economy, but also mitigate the impacts of climate change. You're right, we need to do a bigger pod on it, but we've got some other stuff to go on to. God, we got into it quickly this week, and I love it.
I nearly came over the table at you on point there. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
But we disagreed agreeably.
Yeah, I just watched it happen.
You were egging it on.
I'm the voice of the listener.
I actually gave a talk on politics at the National Farmers Union Cymru conference, and I thought I was going to be hated because I'm such a townie. I played hard into so I actually grew up where I grew up in Northampton. That was actually very rural. We backed onto a farm, and I actually have I don't want to flex, but I have an intermediate falconry qualification. I actually I went hard into the fact that I know a weird amount about birds of prey. So farmers would be talking to me going about beef and sheep, and I've been like, that reminds me of looking after a Harris hawk. It's actually really easy to kill it at a farmers conference. I just slagged off every politician, and they just loved it.
Yeah, they loved it.
It was amazing.
An intermediate falconry course.
So do you stand there with the big glove?
Oh, I can do more than that. I can
Please, Mel. Please.
I can train young birds.
Well,
No. Let's sit in that.
Yeah,
let's sit in that for a second.
Say it again, Will. Say it again.
Nope. I've
Go back 15 seconds and listen to it again.
Do you want an interesting fact? So, obviously, when I was growing up, I was kind of the Harry Potter generation. Everyone wanted owls. If you've got, for instance, a hawk, you would stroke it on its chest. You'd give it a little stroke. Okay. Owls don't like that. They find that quite scary.
Yeah.
So the way you actually
humans too.
Yeah, they don't love it.
When I'm training birds. If you want to show affection to an owl, you actually just put your kind of forehead against its forehead and kind of go.
I thought this topic would never come up, right? But
I did.
You're like, this is so coming.
This
Episode
is classic Will.
I adopted a little baby owlet in 2019. So I found a little owlet at the base of a tree, and it was so cold. It was clearly going to die, and I thought a fox is going to rip it apart. So I'm going to bring it inside. So it was lambing time anyway, so we had animals, around. So I put it in a little shoebox, kept it warm. I thought it's going to die overnight, rest in peace. Namaste. And then woke up in the morning, it was like on its feet. Like, what are we doing? And for about 6 months, we had this pet owl. We called him Oscar. Yeah. He used to land on our head. We'd take him for a little walk.
What sort of owl was it?
Tawny.
Nice.
Yeah. Spot the virgins. Yeah. It was great, honestly, Oscar. And then we kept trying to rewild him, but the problem was because he was not nocturnal, he was up when we were up.
Yeah.
So he was never around when his little girlfriends would be around. But one day
he's like a vampire owl.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, but no, he flew off in the end, and it was a sad day for the Owen household.
I bet.
How do you identify in terms of your national identity? Do you feel Welsh? Do you feel British? Do you feel British and Welsh?
Thank you for asking. I on occasionally you get these forms and stuff. I would say Welsh. I would say Welsh. I remember being in a politics lecture in first year, and the lecturer saying, "How do you identify?" The same question, and then he berated us for none of us saying European. He goes, "But we are European." Not anymore, man. But I would say I used to say British over Welsh, I think, and now. I don't know if it was when I moved to London for a few years, my Welshness, I felt so much more patriotic, and I think it took me a little bit of moving away before feeling that. But I would say, yes, I'm Welsh, despite the fact born in England, moved here when I was a baby, don't hate a baby. Not my decision. Born in Brighton, moved to Cardiff when I was...
Last name Morgan. You've got credentials.
I've got roots, Bubby. Don't know why I called you Bubby. I'd say, in answer to your question, Will, Welsh.
So this question has me internally screaming because when you are mixed race, it's such a an identity crisis
Sure.
from the minute you're born up until now. I would say, like yourself, Welsh. If there was a form that was like click British or tick Welsh, I would always tick Welsh. I would say that I don't fully feel like I have the right to say that I'm Welsh.
Really?
Yeah. Because not to propagate.
Just to be clear, you're a Welsh speaker wearing a Yamarohid fleece.
Yeah, I know. This is me emphasising my Welshness so hard.
Yeah. Green nails.
Yeah. But I don't feel fully like I have the right to say that I'm Welsh. But also, where else would I go? I've got nowhere else to go.
I don't want you to go anywhere.
I know, but some people do. People do, and I suppose I just always feel a little bit like a guest. So there's, you guys could probably say, you could criticise Wales, as we do on the pod or, whatever. But it's like, how do I put it? If someone was to speak ill of my mum, I would go 12 rounds with them. I'm like, you can't say that, but I can say that she's crazy, but nobody else can. Yeah. And I think that's how some people feel about Wales if I were to criticise it. They're saying, we're allowed to, you're a guest here, you're not allowed to.
Because to me, you feel like the most Welsh of us. The three of us.
Well, thank you for saying that. I would say some Welsh nationalists do not feel that way. And I would definitely say within the Welsh-speaking population of Wales, I am a guest.
Really?
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
so fucking sad.
Yeah, it is difficult, especially when that is, I feel so Welsh. Like you, when I'm in England, my Welshness becomes XXL. I basically become Tom Jones.
Yeah.
But I am made to feel like a guest. So I don't know, is the honest answer. I feel Welsh, but I feel like I'm not as Welsh as, I'm not allowed to be as Welsh as other people.
Have you always felt that, or has that been an incremental thing? Like, for example, you mentioned the Welsh nationalists, sort of the online stuff last week or the week before.
Yeah.
Did that exacerbate things? Like, have you always felt like that, or has it ebbed and flowed?
I think it always has felt like that, but now I can recognise what it is.
Right.
So when I was a child, I was very othered, very othered, but also growing up in a very rural Welsh-speaking area, which I absolutely adored. I absolutely adored it, and I adore the people there. But there was an element, be it malicious or not, that you're not quite like us. And I couldn't put my finger on what that was. And I think as I grew, through being a teenager and so on, I became to resent Wales a lot. I really did not want to be Welsh. Because I felt rejected. I was like a Welsh incel, basically. It was like, well, he doesn't want me, so I don't fucking want you either. Yeah. And then, and I do think as well that played into why it was kind of a relatively easy choice when I got offered the job to work for Alan Cairns. As a Tory, that was quite an easy choice for me because I was like, well, fuck Wales. I was like, they don't want me.
That's so interesting.
So why would I go somewhere where, I was never going to go and work for Plaid. They don't want me. So that was quite an easy moral choice for me.
Yeah. But
then when I was there and hearing some of the stuff that was said about Wales and Welsh identity and especially the Welsh language, that was where that was what I felt very difficult, and my Welshness started to bubble up inside of me, and that's where I'd kick off, and other things as well. But so it took for me to go, I hate Wales and I want to get away from it, I hate all of it, to then go full circle, and now I speak Welsh all day every day basically. Like you said, I'm sat here in an Amalheed fleece.
The Tories have done more to promote Wales than anyone.
They've made me so much more Welsh than I was
one
before.
voter at a time. That's what they're doing.
So sorry for this is such a long-winded answer. Probably not what you were going for. But I find it very difficult. And the minute anybody says, "How do you feel?" I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like I've got two divorced parents. I'm Welsh and I'm of colour. And when you've got two divorced parents, they both love you. They just don't love each other.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's really, really that's fascinating because I think when we first met, I probably pigeonholed you as Welsh-speaking Aberystwyth. I know what she thinks on everything.
Yeah.
Which everyone, I think, does to a certain extent about everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, grew up in the Midlands, lived my whole adult life in Wales, came to Wales for university. when I always felt British. That's how I define myself. For my first probably 6 months in Wales, I became aggressively English because everyone seemed to hate me.
Self-preservation type thing, right?
Yeah.
Similar to sort of you sort of rallying against Wales, this kind of thing. Well, I'm going to protect myself.
Yeah.
And then covering Wales, like journalistically, I was thinking about this. Have I gone native? Have I just completely drank the Welsh almost nationalist Kool-Aid? But actually, I don't think I have. I think I think you realise that Wales has really been screwed over in so many ways for so long. And I'm a West Brom fan. I love an underdog. But I think over time, I've then gravitated back to this idea of being British because I feel like then it encaptures the Welsh stuff. But then when I started doing the book on Welsh identity, Welsh independence, I then, because most of the Welsh nationalists that there are some very vocal ones who essentially think that they can track their lineage back to Owain Glyndwr and just fuck off. Just get a grip on yourselves.
Give it a break.
Yeah, but there was a lot, and this might be because of they were talking to me, but I perceived quite a lot were actually if you've decided to make your home in Wales, you're Welsh. And actually I think that is the best way for Welsh identity to be, because I think, well, actually I could be Welsh. And when I go abroad now, I meet people from England. I actually kind of say, actually, I'm from Wales.
You're trying it out.
Yeah,
like a new nickname.
Exactly.
I'm going to go to sixth form now. I'm going to call myself W Dog.
But I found myself I went away a few weeks ago, and I had some people from Wales were talking. I was like, oh, I'm from Cardiff, and I was talking to them. I was like, oh yeah, it feels quite nice doing this. And then someone else made a Wales joke, and I just went. I was away to see England play cricket, and someone made a Wales joke, and I'm like, well, actually, I think when you're watching the England and Wales cricket team, actually, Geraint Jones was a fantastic wicketkeeper, and you need to back up. Anyway,
my dad was Owain Glyndwr.
Did you know that parts of Herefordshire until the early 1900s spoke Welsh? Anyway, the reason we've done this in a very long-winded way, do you remember when we said we wanted this podcast to be short and punchy? Was because last week we talked about that study by Dr. Jack Lana and Professor Richard Wynne-Jones. They're basically writing all my work for me at the moment. They did that election study. They did a really interesting thing where they looked at how people identify has changed from 2016 to 2024, but also how people who identify a certain way sit on the electoral scale. So we're going to share some graphs now. Essentially, the further to the left these circles are, the more left-wing people are. The further to the right, the more right-wing. The further up the graph they are, the more authoritarian they are. And the further down they are, the more liberal they are. So as most people who are listening are actually listening and not watching, I'll give you the kind of headlines for it. So the first thing to note is, in 2016, whether you identify as British and Welsh, other, they're all really, really close together. But that has changed massively. If you identify as Welsh now, you are much, much more likely to be left-wing, and you are much more likely to be more liberal. So some of that is that younger people have come into the voter pool, and they are more likely to be left-wing and liberal. But the idea of being Welsh now means you are very, very likely to be left-wing. There are very, very few really right-wing people who just say, I am Welsh. They're much more likely to say they're British, which is quite interesting, isn't it?
And obviously this is from 2016 to 2024 now. Yeah. 2020, obviously, we've talked about this before, but COVID, more people being aware of devolution and what things are, and the stark difference between Drakeford and Johnson's decision-making. Do we feel like that was possibly a splinter point where things, and possibly Brexit as well, obviously, that was, the first one being 2016, that's when I think politically and societally people started to splinter.
Yeah, I think people have become much more aware that it's okay to be just Welsh. I think, even in the last 20 years, it's only really become the thing that people want to send their kids to Welsh language schools, even if they're first language English. It used to be Welsh language parents would raise their kids just to speak English because it was seen as it would hold them back. That's changed. The other things I'd say, think are interesting, the growth of people saying that they're other, and so they don't, has also massively increased. And my first thought on that was, well, that's just immigration, isn't it? That's people coming into... But actually, it is a big thing of people now saying, actually, I'm European. So things like
So the Brexit vote has really fortified how European people feel or how not.
Yeah. Absolutely. So people now saying, actually, I think of myself as a citizen of Europe. So that other category has grown. But the thing I really want to draw attention to is the difference between, in the study, they've called it British E and British W. So if you ask someone if they're British, they then said, were you born in England or were you born in Wales? And so I would say I'm from England. If I said I was British, I would be a British E. But if someone was from Wales and said they're British, they'd be a British W. Now, in 2016, those two groups of people, in terms of how left and right they were and how liberal and authoritarian they were almost the same. There was very little difference between them. That has changed massively. So if you are a British E, so a British person born in England, lives in Wales, you are still pretty central. You are pretty much in the middle of left and right. You're slightly more authoritarian than liberal, but you're fairly near the middle. If you define yourself as British, but you're born in Wales, you are now massively right-wing. Massively right-wing. You are the furthest right of all the categories.
Wow.
Which is crazy. The British E is still more right than left, but it's become more liberal in outlook. And what is interesting about this is, if you are British, if you say you're British, but you are born in Wales, the people you have most in common with are people in England who say they are English rather than British. Yeah. So the British Welsh are the same as the English.
And I'm thinking that's conservative voters, as in big C conservative voters. Like if you identify as British but you live in Wales, I imagine you're voting Conservative or now Reform. But then that feels like where it's going, right?
Yeah. So they haven't gone into like in that much detail, or if they have, I haven't read it.
Yeah.
But they are. I think that is that idea of it is an older person who is, I am from Wales, but I am British. That is a much more trends to older people. The other thing to point out is the amount of people who are just English only is incredibly small. There's actually, most people might say they're British and English or British and Welsh, but the British and Welsh category and the Welsh category and the other category are things that are growing. But I think it's just interesting how much more divided we have become in the space of 8 weeks.
Yep.
8 weeks? 8 years.
But in terms of that British English or just English, I think in England there is such a lack of information as to what Britain is. You know, I think you can easily meet an English person who does not realise that Wales is culturally very different, that we have our own language. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way. They're not taught it. They don't know what the difference is. And so I think for somebody to say that they are English is almost a very political stance, whereas a lot of people blur Britishness and Englishness. 100%. You know, when they see Team GB, they think it's England. Yeah. I think a lot of English people, not in a horrible way, think that England is the UK or is Britain. Sorry.
Yeah, it's interchangeable, and you get that a lot. You know, globally, people. You know.
You go, right? Oh, you're from England.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interchangeable in the same way that I imagine me saying that Netherlands and Holland are the same would kick off a lot of people on a Dutch podcast right now. I have no idea.
There's a 3 of us over there going, it's bloody Robin Morgan.
I still look the same, weirdly. Very strange. Look like a very, very Dutch man.
It's actually an issue for England as well, because if you walk through the valleys and you see a house covered in Welsh flags, you kind of go, look at them.
It's cute, isn't it? Yeah.
If I walk through England, like where I'm from, and see a house covered in Cross of St George, I try not to, but I also kind of think prick.
Well, I feel like I'm getting attacked. Do you know what I mean? It's a political stance.
It's a branding
and that
thing.
really pisses me off, because but I think that because it just means that a certain part of our politics have co-opted being English, but actually that's because and I think the inability of England to define itself as something is actually a really big issue, and England becoming more its own thing and understanding that what Englishness is and not just conflating it with Britishness is something that I think would be actually quite a healthy conversation to have. Let's face it, it's not going to be had in a healthy way. But what I also wanted to ask you about Welsh values, because we hear about Welsh values, and anyone who lives in Wales knows there's this thing, this Welshness. There is this thing when you come to Wales that there's something there, isn't it? But it's really hard to put your finger on when you try and quantify it, because I tried to do that for but the last book was what is a Welsh value? Because you'd say, oh, it's community, it's warmth, it's friendliness. But I think that's quite a universal value. I wouldn't say that parts of England don't have that.
I think most people would want to say that about where they live. You're not going to be like, we're absolutely vitriolic. we are vile human beings.
We're individualist to the absolute T.
You'd say that in a small town USA, right? It's community. Everyone
Yeah.
wants to think of themselves as that.
I'd be really interested if people want to message in, like, just contact us through our social media channels. Like, what is a Welsh value? What is Welshness? Because it's quite a hard thing to quantify. I asked Adam Price about this, and he actually
I bet he had some views.
He did have some views. To be fair, it was one of the best answers.
I am the Welsh value.
He actually, to be fair to him, gave one of the best answers I've heard on it. And I'm not sure I 100% agree with it, but he essentially said for him, the fact that wherever you go in the world, if someone is from a rural or farming background, they are more likely to vote for a right of centre party. Whereas in Wales, lots and lots of farmers vote for Plaid Cymru, which is a overtly socialist party. And that thing of being socially minded might be quite a Welsh trait. And I think obviously some of it is to do with language. Because
I think a lot of it, to be fair.
that was kind of my kind of thinking, well, is it? But
I think a lot.
he said with Wales, most people are only 2 generations away from grinding poverty.
Yeah.
And I think that does affect that worldview. There isn't the kind of aristocracy, for want of a better word, is smaller in Wales. And you can see it in Welsh rugby, can't you? Like, the background of a typical Welsh rugby player is probably different in terms of social economic group to an English rugby player.
Hugely.
So
and
much.
Irish.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd be interested just for people to message in and say what is a Welsh value, because I feel like I know it in my heart, but I can't articulate it in any meaningful way.
I think what's difficult is, and this is a good thing, is that Wales is not monolithic. We are not that small that we all feel the same way about everything. Clearly, according to the graph, because rural poverty is a really interesting point that I think is not looked into as much, and really should be focused on. But the people who live in Ceredigion are probably going to feel very differently as to what a Welsh value is to people who live in Wrexham. And that's great because it means that we're a thriving country where different pockets of communities can feel differently about the area. Friends who I have who grew up in Cardiff had a very, very different idea of what Welshness was to what I did. Yeah. And, and that's a really good thing. The fact that we've got that variety, I think it just proves that Wales isn't as small as we always make it out to be.
And I totally agree on rural poverty, especially. I think that's right. One thing, I know we do need to move on, but one thing that really annoyed me, and at the risk of alienating our entire listener base,
I'm going to say our entire listener. We're doing better than one.
At the risk of alienating him, one thing that really, really pissed me off during the research for the book is this idea in some parts of Wales that some people are more Welsh than others. That Carmarthenshire is more Welsh than Monmouthshire. And if you want to take things forward like an independence movement, you have to bring all of these component parts together, and you can't treat one area of, like, because somebody, for instance, votes Tory doesn't mean they're not Welsh. And I think part of Wales growing up is, as you say, Mel, having a conversation about what Welshness is, and it isn't a fixed thing, it's evolving.
100%. And I think the Welsh language groups need to really look at themselves as well, because if we want 1 million speakers by 2050, as I'm sure we all do, we have to stop gatekeeping, and we have to stop going, well, they're not going to speak Welsh because they're from that area, or their Welsh isn't going to be good enough for TV because they're from a certain area. We need to be so much more accepting. Otherwise, those people who are gatekeeping it are killing it.
Do you think that's getting better generationally, though, with less gatekeeping? Do you feel like that's a different vibe of Welsh speakers who are now growing up thinking it's fine to mess up, it's fine to go into a bit of Wenglish every now and then, or do you feel like that idea of gatekeeping is being passed down between?
I don't think the gatekeeping is being passed down, but what scares me is that we're so close to losing it. The generation who are kind of fine with Wenglish, who aren't gatekeeping it, aren't going to be old enough to be the decision makers by the time we've lost it. That's what really scares me. And I think the people holding on to it, I get stopped in the supermarket and somebody tell me that my Welsh wasn't very good on the TV the night before. You know, that's where we're at.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. That is where we're at.
I get told that about English.
Exactly. We need to get over ourselves.
Yeah.
We really, really do. And the problem is that people are going to be too scared when they leave school. They'll come out, they'll have spoken Wenglish in the classroom or with their friends in the yard, and they're feeling good about it. They'll go to a very Welsh-speaking area. They'll be mocked or they'll be corrected or just spoken English to because their Welsh wasn't good enough, and they'll never be confident enough to do it again. Or they'll be denied an opportunity because their Welsh wasn't quite good enough. And I think it's going to be such a Pyrrhic victory for these gatekeepers. They're like, yeah, well, let's keep it as pure as possible. You're going to have 3 speakers.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about other languages, I mean, English is slang, right? It's,
Yes,
that
exactly.
language evolves, and
Yeah.
it'd be good to be able to. Yeah, I mean, a confidence thing. I mean, both my kids are Welsh speakers through school, and I'd love, we'd do it. We've made that decision to. So they have both languages, and they can hopefully use it as. I mean, my son uses it just as a secret language for him and his
Great.
sister. Yeah,
I bet that's
absolutely.
so hard,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, big time. Really? Yeah, then you can hear them whispering. I'm just like,
Not in Welsh in my house.
can you get my Welsh not out? I'm a nuanced person. I send them to Welsh speaking school, but I'm not in my household.
we could do so much on this, couldn't we? We could, because like it feeds into what we were talking about before about rural communities, because rural farming is a really good way of is a place where the language is safeguarded. Got some interesting news. Well, interesting maybe, it's playing a bit fast and loose. The Welsh Government have introduced a tourism tax.
Yeah.
A tourism tax. How? So obviously, because it's 2024, people are going to lose their minds over this. They're going to go just absolutely crackers. I'm trying not to swear as much. What do you think of crackers?
Crackers is nice. Why are you not trying to swear? Because kids listen to this.
I just feel like I swear quite a lot. And I'm trying to be less of a twat.
Not doing well so far, Will.
I would have said that before this conversation, but
Let me tell you about eagles.
don't rub your legs when you say that.
So, this tourism tax, let me explain. The way it's going to work is it's called a tourism levy. The Welsh Government are introducing legislation this week. It's a bill which will essentially mean that councils can introduce the tax. So it doesn't happen automatically. It's only if a local authority decides to do it. The way it will work is if you stay overnight in an Airbnb, a hotel, a self-catered accommodation, you will have to pay £1.25 a night in tax. That's for everyone. That's kids, babies, everyone per head will pay £1.25 a night. If you are staying at a campsite or in a hostel, it's 75p a night. And the reason that they've done this is an attempt to mitigate the impact of mass tourism. So some councils, this will come in, probably the earliest is 2027. I did the math. So if you are...
But say that again.
You did meth.
You did the math.
You did crystal meth.
I did the math.
Doesn't want to swear, but we'll do class A's on the podcast. Great.
Yeah, basically, I'm meth and falconry is my niche.
This is Tinder bio.
If you were 2 parents with 2 children and they stayed in a hotel for 7 nights, that'd cost them 35 quid.
Okay.
So that is the kind of the cost of it. There are some exemptions. So if you are a disabled person traveling with a carer, you're exempt. Homeless people who are placed in hotels by local hostels and hotels by local authorities, they are exempt as well. And also emergency stays. So if you had a fire or a flood, very topical, this week especially. So you were placed, had to go to a hotel because your house was flooded.
Yeah.
You are able to claim the money back.
Okay.
So you pay, but you claim the money back. Now, you're also exempt if you stay more than 31 nights somewhere. Because some people are residents in hotels, aren't they?
Alan Partridge.
Yeah.
Famously. Yeah.
So you wouldn't pay it. So if you stay 32 days somewhere, if you stay more than 31 nights, you're also exempt.
I feel like financially, if you were staying 31 nights, you might as well stay an extra night, and then you'd probably save yourself some money. Just not trying to be the Martin Lewis of this podcast, but check it out.
Tell me what I can do with my pension.
You have a pension?
The money has to be spent on certain things. So councils will get the money, but it has to be spent on either mitigating the impact of visitors, maintaining and promoting the Welsh language, promote and support sustainable economic growth of tourism, or providing, maintaining or improving infrastructure and facilities used by visitors. So they're quite broad topics.
Sure.
So councils can choose whether to introduce it or not. I think some definitely will. Some, there's not much point. So, for instance, it will probably make a lot of sense for Cardiff Council to do it from a financial perspective, and places like Gwynedd, Pembrokeshire, Ceredigion, Anglesey, Conway. Just going to keep listing.
Yeah, keep going.
I actually,
all of them.
I actually did a quiz, and you had to name all the Welsh local authorities, and it's actually quite easy to do.
Sounds like a fun night, Jesus.
Yeah.
You and your falcons out again.
Yeah. I spend a lot of time on it.
For the after party with Will. Guys, I've got a game.
I think that's when the meth helps, to be honest.
Oh God. Let me tell you about Denver shit. For instance, council like Blaenau Gwent, very small, not as many visitors, might not consider bringing it in. But it's interesting. I mean, people all say this will massively impact travel and tourism, which I think it'll be like an attack on like Airbnbs and things like that. Some people will say, well, good. Some people will say, well, actually, we need this because it brings people into communities and provides money. Would you be put off coming to somewhere because of a fee like that?
No, and I've used them before across Europe and in the UK. I was in Manchester a couple of weeks ago, and they have a tax for staying over there, I think, already.
Yeah.
I mean, it's especially when like 75.
Scotland has it.
Scotland has it. Yeah, exactly. When we gig in Edinburgh and things, I think £1.50 a day.
£1.25.
£1.25. It's gone down. No, I don't see that. Obviously, as you say, what was it, £35 for a family of four
for a week.
For a week. If you're going away for a week with a family of four, is £35 going to touch the sides? Really, make a packed lunch one day. Don't go to a Turtle Bay for your lunch.
I mean, my view of it is that it's essentially a way of removing some of the guilt you feel that you're swarming this like quite small village in North Wales.
Do you feel guilt about that?
I feel bad if
swarming with your eagles.
Yeah, we had flock actually.
What a prick I am.
I think personally, I don't mind paying it, but also I'm not living hand to mouth. And actually, maybe if you go on a local holiday somewhere in Wales because you can't afford to go abroad, maybe that does affect you. I think the people who'll be most annoyed are the hotels themselves. So it's on the hotel to collect this. So they don't have to pass that on to people. So if I ran an Airbnb and 4 people came to stay, I have to pay that tax. But the expectation is they will pass it on to those people. But they might not. They don't have to. So the argument is it's just more admin. The Welsh Government have tried to mitigate that. So it's actually going to be collected by the Welsh Revenue Authority, which is like a central body which manages the collection of certain taxes in Wales. They'll administer it and collect it on behalf of councils who opt in. It's as simple as it can kind of be made. It's a flat rate. The exemptions are fairly clear.
Yeah. What is being spent on, I feel like, is quite interesting as well. That feels like quite a sensible, broad...
Yeah, because it's too, if it's going back into the area to help them with kind of the impact of tourism on the area, that just kind of, I feel like, makes sense. Like when we're in Edinburgh, we bring Edinburgh up every week. Mm-hmm. But when we are there, you see that the bins, because they're not collected any more frequently than they would be any time of the year, they overflow. There's rats everywhere. It's something like the sewage or something or other. They really struggle because like the population triples.
Yeah.
And so if anything, I'd be willing to pay more so that those facilities can be supported. And I think that if that's what this is going towards, then brilliant. However, the way that they've been laid out and named, they feel like very broad, and I think almost anything could probably fall into that umbrella or under that umbrella.
Yeah.
So if all 22 Welsh councils, which I can name, were to have the scheme, it would raise about £33 million. So not insignificant, not like small,
Not groundbreaking, but
more than it cost to roll out 20 miles an hour.
Interesting.
You almost went a whole podcast without mentioning it.
And presumably that 33 million, councils can spend that on those issues, which then means their budget is freed up for other things.
Stuff. Well, it's a revenue. It's a way of raising revenue, essentially. Yeah. It was. It also ties in. We had recently that the Welsh government allowed councils to increase council tax on holiday lets and second homes. So,
and I think that's the key here, because the whole time we were talking about this, the sirens in my head were going, "Isn't the biggest problem that we've got the second homes, the empty homes, the Airbnbs, that kind of thing?" And I'd just be interested to hear how it kind of impacts that, really.
Yeah. So I asked the Welsh government about what impact this will have, if they've done any modelling on how it will affect tourism, and obviously it's always a range. Unfortunately, we're recording this an hour before they release that report, so I'll touch on it next week, how if we want to talk economics on it, how elastic that demand is to price changes. But the other thing I would kind of say with it is, obviously you're right about the thing that has the biggest impact on communities is second homes, because that affects things like the number of kids in schools, it pushes up house prices and stuff like that, and the council tax changes that have already come in will have probably a bigger impact on that. I think there are arguments that legislation, when it came in, did affect legitimate businesses quite a lot, because the occupancy rates you required to be classed as a business were essentially you needed to be occupied 50% of the time. And actually that's really hard even for a legitimate business to be occupied half the time, because in winter you don't really get many visitors. So, but yeah, we could talk all down that. We're not going to, because I want to talk about birds. But the only thing is, the Scotland one is slightly different. So in Scotland, there's no central authority that administers it. It's administered by councils individually. But I just think I think it's just fundamentally quite interesting. It'll get blown up into some kind of culture war thing. It'll have merits. It'll have things that are against it. But I think it's fundamentally, for me, I don't really have a problem with it.
It feels like a smallish amount of money that can go towards helping issues which government would have to spend money on anyway. It feels... Yeah, as you say, it's going to be blown into we hate the English. We hate people from abroad, but no, that seems good, right?
When you go to Barcelona, you don't go, well, I'm going home. When they ask you to pay that.
Turn around and those English people who do go, this them wanted to keep us out. You know, they don't get, like you say, to Spain and go, well, they want to keep us out too. Yeah. But when it's Wales, for some reason, it's always just seen as a very political stance. And anyway, it's just, boosting our own economy.
Yeah, it's policy. This is what we should. This is what we want from our government. We don't want people just stoking culture war stuff. It feels like, from a UK point of view, the voters got sick of that stuff for the last few years of Tories. We want policy. We want people to make people's lives better. This feels like it could happen.
Well, if you're in Pembrokeshire and you're a village which gets overwhelmed by tourists, and you ask around, I would imagine just as many of those tourists are from Cardiff as are from England. So, I don't really buy the kind of anti-English thing. I don't feel attacked as an English person. I might feel annoyed if I was a hotelier who had to deal with it. But, it's, I'm sure they'll contact us with their views. Do we have any other business?
We are talking, I feel like we can say this.
Let's do it.
We're talking about a live show. If that is something that people would like to attend, then maybe let us know so we can book out the Utilita Arena in Cardiff and put 5,000 meet and greet tickets up right now. No, but let us know if that's something you feel like you want to do.
Yeah, I could do a poll on social media. Could do it. Could do that. But I think just if it is something you'd be interested in, I think we'd like to hear from you, because if you want it, we'd like to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Agreed.
Absolutely. How exciting.
Should be fun, right?
Yeah, I hope people do vote yes. Imagine now if you come back next week and be like, it was 80% no.
Yeah, most people just don't want us.
Yeah, they get enough of us once a week. Just normal thanks, really. Thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for 5-star reviews, all comments on social media. Really lovely, right?
Yeah, and it helps so much.
I think we're 4.7 out of 5 stars, aren't we? That's
a bit rude, actually.
Yeah, I'm unreasonably furious about that.
I will go full Liam Neeson. I will find you and I will end you.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Massive thanks to HayMan Media as well. The company
Yes.
that help us, they've got a great studio in Newport. They help us put together this podcast, produce the RL, edits it down, puts it on YouTube in a very accessible way. It looks super profesh. And yeah, they're great to work with. If you are a business organization, give them a shout, and they can make you look as good as they make us.
Indeed. See you next week.
See you next week.
See you next week. Bye.
Ta-ra. There's two Harris Hawks, one called Sam, one called Maury, and male Harris Hawks are much smaller. We're not. This isn't for the podcast.
100% is. 100%
I
is.
was like, why am I fucking
So
here?
males Harris Hawks and females actually hunt as a pair, and males will sometimes go down rabbit holes to flush out rabbits.
Yeah.
And females will just like sit out there like waiting for the rabbits to run out. And
Great.
the Harris Hawk that I used to take out, he would panic when rabbits would run at him, so he'd try and flap underground and get wedged.
Oh, God.
So we had to then like dig him out, and then you'd get to the base of this this rabbit hole, and there'd just be a very sheepish looking bird. Right,
Can we put that at the end of the pod as a nice little addendum? If you want to hear more about this skip, I'm genuine. I find that so interesting, and I adore how into it you are. I love that. But let's do politics.